just a scientist, former teacher, and psychology grad student here to break down brain behavior and everything in between.
And I'm Tristan, a French entrepreneur with a background in business and a growing passion for mental health in the workplace.
You're listening to Office Hours with Tristan Vivier and Courtney Faco.
Okay, so let's now speak a bit more about what leadership needs to look out for, right? Like just tips for those listeners that are leaders that may want to better understand how they can increase their employees' loyalty in 2025. So, first one is recognition and appreciation. So, 80% of employees report that regular recognition increases their loyalty to an organization, which isn't surprising to me. I think that's just, trying to ensure that your employees know they're doing a good job and appreciate them for that work that they're doing. And I think a big stat that shows that that's kind of overlooked still, unfortunately, is only 28% of US workers feel recognized or praised for doing good work, which is kind of crazy. Don't you think?
Mhm.
Like, I think that's really unfortunate that so many people do so much, good work, but don't get that appreciation. And I can understand why at some point that might be a bit too much and just kind of want to leave. So
Yeah.
not surprising. So another one is growth and development. That drives a lot of loyalty within newer generations, and their stats backing it. 71% of millennials and about similar share for Gen Z say they will leave within 3 years if leadership development and growth opportunities are lacking. I can speak to this personally. One of the organizations I was working for, I was doing very, very well at my job. And then all of a sudden, kind of at a time where I think I could have had a promotion and could have gone up, and saw that there was none available. People that had done amazing work, had stayed there for a while, weren't going up and weren't being promoted. And I think for me, that kind of, I was like, okay, so how long do I have to stay? If these people that have been there have done extremely well, have been there for quite a while, still haven't been promoted. So how am I going to go up in the world? And when is that going to come? So yeah, I think that's a big one. I think organizations need to realize that they need to promote internally and really favor that and give access to promotions for individuals to grow. Because I think otherwise it's just your motivation just goes out. I don't know if you can relate to that, Court, if you've had any experience in this sector, but that's something personally that really speaks to me when it comes to loyalty.
Yeah, a little bit like coming from like a profession, it's a little bit different because those opportunities for like promotions, they don't really exist unless you're going to go back and do schooling for them. But on the leadership end, yes, I really think if that leadership isn't great, it's a whole kind of like self-fulfilling prophecy. Like if the leadership isn't great, you don't feel supported. When you don't feel supported, you're not going to put your best probably foot forward. Like we said, you're not going to show up as your whole self. And yeah, I think you're a little bit more of like a wanderer. You're going to start to look at like job opportunities that are popping up or
Yeah.
um places that you can hop to. And I think it just all kind of is this cycle. It's cyclic, right?
Yeah.
And it starts at the top. It starts at the tip of the leadership iceberg. And if leadership isn't prime, then I
Yeah.
really do think the employees are going to feel that and they're going to just start looking for maybe some leadership that's a little bit more supportive and will provide them those growth opportunities.
Yeah, for sure. 100%. And I think, yeah, like you said, it starts really at the top because it wasn't my manager's fault or even my manager's manager's
Hmm.
fault. Very much just organizational structure that needs to be
Hmm.
reevaluated,
Yeah.
especially the company I was in where they were hiring. They just went on a massive hiring spree, right? And were just hiring left and right. And so what do you do with those people at some point, right? Like you've hired so much, you need to give them growth opportunities because if there's no opportunity, why would they stay?
Hmm.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but it does happen a lot, especially in the startup world. Another one, obviously for driving loyalty and that leaders need to pay attention to, which is no surprise, especially after the 2020 COVID crisis, work-life balance and flexibility, right? Flexible working arrangements increase retention by up to 25%. And employees rating their work-life balance highly are 10 more likely to stay at their company. So yeah, I think if you're a leader, just kind of giving that flexibility to your employees and understanding that has become now a key part of work and being able to kind of adjust your own
schedule and
workday around things that you have, because life happens. And I think, like we spoke about, I think there was a big generational shift that may have been due to different family dynamics and family values. But I think nowadays, yeah, if you have kids, if you have a partner and all of that, you've got things going on outside of work that you need, work to understand that that is happening and that you are a human being and not a robot, and that you need to be able to kind of manage your own work-life balance. And I think as a leader, that's become extremely important to take into account and make sure that you abide by that, because
Mhm.
will increase your loyalty. Inclusion and belonging. When employees feel like they belong, 91% are more engaged compared to only 20% who do not feel a sense of belonging. Again, that's not kind of surprising. I think if you can bring your full self to work, like we spoke about, you'll be much more engaged and so much more likely to stay at the organization that you're at. So yeah, as a leader, obviously just trying creating that safe place for your employees will do a lot on that. And then finally, which I think is a big one, and again that is often overlooked, is feedback and communication. Transparent communication and frequent, actionable feedback is critical to build that trust for loyalty. And I feel, employees that don't have that and don't know what's going on. And I know in the last podcast, the video where the manager was telling her employee, "Oh, yes, you've made this mistake. Like, again, why is this happening again and again?" And the employee's like, "Okay, no problem. I understand I messed up, but how can I do better?" And she's like, "Oh, yeah, well, you should know." Well, that's not, that's just not feedback that's that you can actually work on and actually understand and avoid making that mistake in the future. So I think really providing that transparent communication feedback is something that's super important. Again, I can relate to that. I've had situations where I haven't been exactly told what was wrong and what I could have done better. And then you're like, okay, well, it's just there's no way for me to know. Like, there is no, I can guess maybe, but I'm much less likely to actually understand than a manager that clearly knows I've done something wrong and must have the answers, right? So, yeah, I think that's a big thing. Again, I don't know if you have any examples around that quote, but that was kind of, for me, definitely the ones that stand out are feedback, communication, work-life balance for sure, and growth and development are big ones, in my opinion, that can drive loyalty for sure.
Yeah, I agree. Like I've already spoke about like work-life balance in this podcast, previous podcast. But for me, it was the statistic that you said when you said employees feel they belong, 91% will be engaged compared to only 20% who do not feel a sense of belonging. And that one like jumped out at me because I've had an experience surrounding that where I was in one environment where leadership was great, you meshed really well with the staff. I showed up as, like, my whole self. I wasn't nervous to, like, put my best foot forward, try new things, see what worked, what didn't work. The feedback was phenomenal, and it was such a well-delivered, positive feedback method where it was like, "Yeah, it didn't work. That's fine. Let's figure out why and see how we can, like, troubleshoot it, and can we still build on it?" Where I've also been in professional environments where I existed like an island and I knew I didn't belong or wasn't accepted. There was a little bit of that like hostility, toxicity. And yeah, the feeling or the need to jump just amplified each day. Cause like think about it, like it's no different than kids. If they don't feel like they belong, they kind of isolate and they don't want to be there and they shut down and they want to leave. Like at the end of the day, we're kind of still like a little kid in a big person body.
Yeah.
Everyone has the desire to be included, and that's no different in the workplace.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think, yeah, that sense of inclusion, belonging is super important. It's true. Yeah. No, I can only imagine. I haven't had personal experience in that where I felt that way, but I can only imagine being in that situation. I wouldn't want to stay in it, and I don't think anyone would. And so I think, yeah, it's super important for leaders to really pay attention to that and create that, again, safe place. It's like we keep talking about psychological health and safety, and but that is what it is, right? It's just being able to give that safe place to your employees to be themselves, because it's ultimately going to allow them to thrive in your workplace, which is what everyone wants. And yeah, I think another one which is overlooked a lot, but recognition and appreciation is, it's not hard to do as well. Just saying to someone,
No.
good job, you've done awesome. And when, especially in those meetings where there's a lot of people, leadership and all that, just kind of going out of your way to just appreciate those employees that have worked hard and have worked on that project and have done that. Um, Everyone likes that, and it's a good thing to do. And I think it just shows that you care about your employees and you want people
Hmm.
to know that they're doing well. So I think that's something that's often overlooked, but it's something that is really necessary. So yeah, if we look quickly at loyalty in action and what works for organizations. So again, looking at that organizational structure, making sure that there's easily some promotional paths for your employees to give them that sense of growth and supporting them through that, making sure that they know that they've got that, to put steps, concrete steps for them to reach that goal as well. We've spoken about the importance of goal setting. Again, understanding if the employee doesn't want to stay at this spot and may want to progress, and that's a conversation to have. Some people might not. Some people might be very happy with their job, and that's awesome. But if they do have that ambition to move forward, giving them actual steps to move forward and what they need to do, what are the metrics they need to hit to reach that, that's going to really drive that engagement, and that's that loyalty. And workers promoted within the first 3 years have a 70% chance of staying compared to those that are not. Again, huge, right? Just getting a clear career track in front of them with some promotions that are attainable to them, again, drives that retention. Another one, recognition programs. We've spoken about the importance of that. Active, visible recognition can reduce turnover by about 31%. Again, just shows that importance. And yeah, the last one is all about culture, is building that community. Connected, supportive team culture can increase, collaboration and retention, right? The more people feel like they belong within the team, they belong within this community, and they can be their true selves and share their experiences and help each other out, the more likely they're going to stay. So yeah, that's kind of the tips I had for our leaders out there.
Yeah, and like as I listened to that, Tris, I guess I had this like big brain thought where I went, huh, like I'm reflecting on the environment that I felt very, very included in and the environment I didn't feel included in, and just what loyalty looked like in each environment because it's such a compare and contrast moment. And if there's leaders listening to this podcast today, I know a lot of us might feel like, oh yeah, like I should definitely like recognize my employees more. That'd be such a simple step. But my caution would be coming from maybe you're like, my environment isn't fostering loyalty. And maybe you've listened to a previous podcast and you're like, there's definitely things I could implement or work on to make it more of a positive, inclusive, friendly environment. If you're a leader who's going to implement a recognition program, I would definitely caution you or ask you to take a step back and say, have I built that community? Because if you haven't built the community first, the last thing someone wants is public recognition by people who are nasty towards them.
Yeah,
I know for myself, when I was getting recognition in the very safe environment where there was a great community, I was like, yeah, like I want to be recognized. Absolutely. I did do a good job. But in the unsafe or less inclusive environment, that would have been the last thing I wanted because it was not going to be received with respect. It was going to be received with snide comments, bullying, things like that. So I would definitely just kind of caution oneself to say, have I implemented all of the things first? Have I built a community? Do my employees or team members, do they feel safe to receive that recognition?
that's a brilliant point, and I think,
Hmm.
yeah, really, I'm glad that you said that because, yeah, I think it's so important first to build that community, that safe culture. Because, like you said, otherwise it doesn't feel genuine, right? Like it doesn't
Yeah.
feel like it just kind of feels like it's just been done.
Fake
It's like pizza party, right? Where it's
it.
just like, yeah, let's just
Yes.
throw pizza at people and they'll be happy.
Yay. No,
You
and
got the
like,
culture first.
yes, and like whether this resonates with anybody, I say it because I hope people can maybe connect with my experience and just realize they're not alone in experiencing those cultures that maybe aren't the best community. The reason I caution those recognition programs if you haven't evaluated your community first is if I knew an award day or recognition day was coming and I wasn't in a good environment, I'd call in sick because I'm like, it's actually better to not be there than the public display of bullying, the public display of the nastiness that was going to ensue. I'm like, I'd just rather not be recognized. I'm gonna take the day off. Ooh.
Which is
Um,
super. Yeah.
yeah.
So clearly, yeah, I think from what you're saying, clearly there's steps to it. It's not
Mhm.
just start going, I'm going to high five all your employees. Like there's a lot of things that you need to do first, building that culture. And I think that starts with the communication and feedback as well, right? It's like providing safe feedback, and really trying to create that safe place for everyone to be able to bring themselves fully to work. And then from that can lead to all of the other parts, which are the recognition and all that, which are still super important. It's just maybe
Mhm.
there's steps to it instead of
Yeah.
just all do.
No, exactly, Tris. And so, what we kind of encourage is that our leaders promote that psychological safety first
Hmm.
and the inclusive environment first. They're showing that empathy and they're really pushing for that growth and support, maybe before they implement some of the other steps. But ultimately, I guess what we're asking leaders to do who are listening today, or just anyone who's listening today, is just like a self assessment. Like, take a step back and very openly and honestly critique what you're doing. Are you providing a psychologically safe environment? Are you inclusive? Do you think you show enough empathy within reason? And are you promoting that growth and support? Because you don't earn loyalty with authority, you earn it with trust. And one of the biggest things that I've learned, I think over the last 2 years is it does not help anybody to do a self-assessment on this stuff and not be honest with yourself. If you're not being honest with yourself, no change, no growth is going to occur. That loyalty, that retention isn't going to occur. And once we're honest with our self-assessment of like what we're doing, what we're not doing, we can grow. We can grow. So today's employees, they're not looking for a boss who barks orders from the corner office. Like we've all seen that in movies, right? Where the boss is sitting there with like the coffee cup and they're yelling out of their corner stall. And all I can think about is like Wolf of Wall Street for some reason. That's the only movie that comes to mind where they're just yelling and all the things are happening. And like, yeah, probably making stiff cash, but if you've watched the
Yeah.
movie, you know it doesn't end very well. So they want a real human being that's leading the way. So really getting down to like, be a human first, be a
Yeah.
good person first, right? So leadership has shifted big time. We've really gone from command and control to serve and support, right? And I think we've even seen a shift in our verbiage where, for me, a big red flag is if someone goes, my employees versus, oh, my teammates. I can immediately kind of tell what that environment might look like, just even based on something so simple as
Mhm.
removing that hierarchy from the office or the workplace. But here's the reality check. So we know that we want to move from command and control to serve and support, but you had kind of talked about previously the idea of trust. And another study suggested 29% of employees actually trust their direct manager to serve and support versus command and control. So that's a really, really big percentage still who feels like they're supported versus controlled. So, what people want to know now or see now is that clarity, that honesty, and the vulnerability. So, that's why I mentioned before like, be honest with your self assessment. Be honest because if you go, oh, I'm doing everything fine and I don't understand, or yeah, I think I'm doing everything okay, the reality is if your employees or your team members or whatever your verbiage is, if they're jumping and you're not seeing a huge amount of loyalty, the problem might be you, babe. Like you might have to take that step back and say, okay, so I may think I'm doing everything I can, but we need to be honest. We need to be honest with what we're doing.
No, yeah, no, I think that's such an important point, and I think that's what a lot of leaders don't realize is by just admitting, being yourself really, and admitting that you may not have all the answers, and that you are a human being too. I think that makes a whole difference. And I think that's what leaders don't really look at and don't really understand. I think a lot of leaders think that they need to look like that superhero for nothing, can impact them. And it doesn't build that sense of trust. Everyone knows that's not, you're not a human being. If that's the case, you're a robot. Right, or a superhero. But yeah, I think you're not a human and you're not yourself. And I think being able to be vulnerable, open up, even when we talk about mental health and all of that, because as being a leader is not easy. The pressure that
Mm-mm.
all of that. Just being able to open up about that, talk about it without going into whatever you don't want to talk about, but just showing that there is a person behind the leader. I think that's super important. And yeah, I think leaders don't really look at it and the positive impact of actually doing that.
Yes, and I love that you said, like, leaders don't have all the answers. They don't, we don't. And one of the best pieces of advice I received around that, was from one of my professors in university, and they said, "You know what, Courtney, the best thing that I could tell you," and I tell all my students who make it this far with me, "it is better to say, 'You know what? I'm gonna be completely honest with you. I don't really know the answer to your question, but I will go home and look it up for you and I'll get back to you tomorrow so we can talk about it.'" They said to me, "That's better to have people see you as being human and not knowing than pulling an answer out of you know where and looking
Yeah.
like an absolute idiot," because they're like, "You lose respect by looking like an idiot." And so they were like, being honest is it's better. It's better. It makes you look real. It makes you someone who they can relate to. And that's something that we've actually found is people in the workplace, they're not looking for perfection. They're looking for connection. That's really what they want. We
Yeah.
also want consistency in leadership. So I want to talk about this myth. So we're going to like bust a myth about consistency in leadership. So it's this idea that being a good leader isn't just about charisma or having the loudest voice in the room. It's about consistently showing up, having clarity and empathy. And that's the truth. The myth in the past was be that superhero, be that person who doesn't mess up, be that person who can pull an answer out of you know where immediately because it looks like you're the man or the gal or whoever. Wrong, right? Wrong. A good leader, like we've said before, is just showing up as a good human, being consistent with their actions, being consistent with their feedback, and showing that empathy that people are really, really looking for. And this has been proven. So companies that actually invest in developing strong leaders see 25% better business results. Supportive people focused leadership, it's linked to 21% higher profits as well. And when leaders trust and back their teams, employee engagement is 3.4 times higher, which are some statistics we've already talked about, but it's super good to circle back and say if you are taking that inventory of your practices and you are like, "Oh, maybe I'm not providing consistent feedback or positive feedback, or I'm not as empathetic as I could be." These numbers are a really good place to head to and be like, "This is maybe why I should, right? This is why I really should." So, yes, being a good human at work isn't just nice, it's also smart business because at the end of the day, people don't leave companies, they leave bad leadership, which is so stinking true. And I don't know if you can talk to that, Tris, but I certainly have.
Yeah.
You don't leave because of X, Y, and Z. You leave because leadership was intolerable.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I think it all comes down, and like we said, it can be through all the things we mentioned, or like we said, the culture is a big one, but organizational, the organizational structure of the business as well. That's decided by leadership, right? So it is leadership in some way. So it all comes down to leadership at the end of the day. You're right.
Yeah. And I feel like companies are starting to figure it out. Leadership's starting to figure it out. Loyalty isn't built on coffee cards and pizza parties and bonuses. It's really built on that culture, on that empathy, on that community, which then we can build reward programs, etc. So right now, 58% of brands are leaning into personalization to boost engagement, while just 38% are focused on reducing churn. So that tells us something. People don't stay because of perks alone anymore, where we said, like Grandpa Joe's generation, they might have, right? They
Yeah.
stay because they feel seen and supported. So here's where it gets real. In workplaces with strong psychological safety, where leaders are open, they're clear, they're consistent, they're just like chef's kiss dream team, quit rates drop to just 3, which is nuts.
Hmm.
Right? All you have to do is have a shift in your leadership personality, right?
Yeah.
But when that safety is missing, turnover can shoot up to 12%, which relates to some of our numbers and statistics from other studies as well. So if
Yeah.
you're leading a team, remember Building loyalty isn't about the flashy incentives. So if you're like, okay, you listen to this podcast, and you're like, yeah, I'm immediately going to start with a reward program or recognition. I'm going to bring them in like Tim Hortons donuts on a Friday. I promise you, your staff's probably like, girly pup, I could have bought this donut for $1.25 myself and felt a lot better about my life. So
Yeah.
it's about making people feel safe, heard, and like they actually matter. Cause then when you bring that donut in on a Friday, they're like, this person, my leader's genuine about it. They actually got me this donut because they care, not because it's something to check off the I'm a good leader checklist.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, like we said, it's important. So is that culture first, then build everything around it and support that culture. But first, you got to take the time to invest into that. I'm going to start
Hmm.
as we spoke about. So let's talk a bit about an organization I think really that's really interesting and that's done a lot of good things. It's Patagonia. Love their clothing as well. It's awesome. But I think
Can you
what's
like tell me a little bit about Patagonia?
yeah,
Patagonia. I've never ever heard of them in my whole life.
really okay.
Really?
It's outdoor clothing. They specialize in outdoor clothing.
Ooh, this
Uh,
be why icky.
oh, okay. They're really into that. It's kind of their thing, and yeah, they're a really interesting company. And one of the big things that is super interesting about them, so they're in the retail industry, right, is that they've got about a 96 to 97% retention rate, which is insane when you think that in the US, the global retail sector just averages a turnover of 57%. So they've got about 3% turnover. The rest of the retail industry average is 57. So yeah, it just shows kind of what they like, how well they're doing. And one of the big things is around, their mission, their flexibility, and I'll come to that in a second. But ultimately, their deep investment in employee well-being. That's something that they really prioritize. And so, like I said, it can come from what they have surf breaks. So they literally say if the waves are good, they basically go and enjoy it and,
Oh
take
my
some time out
gosh.
of your day to go do that. That's pretty cool, right? That's awesome. But it definitely goes a bit deeper than that. It's this their strategy is around building a business that has core values around the great outdoors, the environment, sustainability. And it doesn't just say that, it also actively invites its employees to champion and enjoy those values every single day. And I really, really like that. And so Yvonne Chouinard, which is the founder of Patagonia, basically donated Patagonia, so the entire business, to a nonprofit for climate action. So that was, I think, in 2022, I believe. And so all of Patagonia's profits from now on will go directly into the fight against climate change, with Shrina expecting about $100 million each year. That's
Mm,
insane. Like
that's crazy.
you don't just donate, whatever, like 2% of your profits or whatever. Like they're taking the whole business and that's donated to this not for profit, and that's how we're gonna work.
Yeah, yeah.
Just giving those opportunities to their employees to actually go do some good and something that it goes back to the first original point and kind of the beginning of this podcast. We were talking about how Gen Zs are looking for companies that align with their values. That's a big thing. Just making sure that the company aligns with people's values and
Oh,
is a company that's does that. It's awesome. I really like
they're
it.
doing the thing. And I'm really sad that I feel sad that I hadn't heard of them. Because as you described them, I'm like, I think I need to add some things to my closet because this sounds like such a fantastic environment to be a part of and work in. And I'd love
Yeah.
to support
Yeah,
that.
for sure.
That's
I mean, you're right.
fantastic.
And it's awesome. It's not only loyalty as an employee, it's also loyalty as a customer, right? Because it comes back
Yeah.
to that thing where I think, customers value companies that treat their employees well. You don't want to buy something from a company that its employees are treated badly. You want to go support a company that actively goes out their way to treat employees well and do everything they need to do that. So yeah,
Like,
no,
I can't promise them that I'm gonna go climb a mountain or go surfing, like, I'll be such a fraud, but I would support that.
yeah. What's a quote which I found really cool is, "How you climb a mountain is more important than reaching the top." And I think that shows
Boom.
again, It's super, it's like, they prioritize that, making sure that employees are happy, that the business actually upholds its values and actively works towards that above, profits, margins, above, reaching that top of what a
Mhm.
lot of organizations in industry probably prioritize over all of that. So I think that's
Yeah.
super interesting. And I'm super, I really like it.
I love that quote where I feel like some maybe leaders or companies who don't have the best intent in mind and their only intent is to make as much money, get there as fast as possible. They get to the top and they put their flag at the top of the mountain and they're like, "Yeah, I did it." And there's just like destruction.
Yeah.
That's all they see is destruction. There's no one rooting for them. They've literally burnt all of their bridges and you're alone.
Yeah, and including probably their employees at that point as well, right? So that aren't even.
Exactly.
So yeah, no, it's really cool to see a company as successful as Patagonia is actually doing some good out there, and ultimately, like you said, it comes down to consistency and actually what you're saying.
Hmm.
I think they've proven they do that, and I think that's awesome. Now it's time to talk about actual practical tips for leaders onto how to implement all of that. We've spoken about the importance of first building the culture before doing any of the other incentives to build loyalty or the other programs that you can put in place, things like that to make employees feel safer in the workplace. But it all starts with the culture.
Hmm.
That, as we've spoken about, a big part of that culture needs to be transparent communication. So for leaders, talking about practical tips around that is not only just, sharing that feedback, which is super important, and about what employees have done well, what they haven't done well, and doing it in a constructive manner, and very clear, very transparent, but it's also around company goals, right? So you need to share the company goals. You need to share what are the goals of the organizations to make sure that everyone's. I like to take the analogy of a boat when I refer to a company, making sure that everyone's rowing in this, in the same direction. Everyone's trying to push the company in the right direction and all towards the same goal. So that can be done through holding regular all hands meetings, Q&A sessions, making sure that everyone can ask questions that they want to ask about the organization. You can even do it anonymously so that, people feel fine opening up. There's no issues around that. But it's really just showing that you're open and you're ready to answer any questions. And like you said, Court, if you don't know the answer to a question, don't just answer it out of nowhere. Make sure that you actually accept being vulnerable, be like, hey, I don't actually know right now. Let me do some research, get back to you on that. But that's a great question.
Hmm.
And make sure you do actually come back to them, because otherwise that's again, that's not
Yeah.
uh no, not actually doing what you're saying. If there are changes, if there are things that are going to happen, like in a business, there needs to be a lot of change in businesses. Just explain why. Don't just say this is what's happening and this is it. Like actually explain why and invite feedback. Invite feedback so that people can feel like they can actually express their opinion without any judgment. And also that will ensure that the organization it does the right change, right? Because I think if you get a lot of feedback, especially from boots on the ground for leadership, that might provide you very insightful feedback into if you're going the right direction or not.
Yes, and just like a little sprinkle of like a drop.
Yeah.
Maybe a leader sitting here listening to that and being like, "That's great. I would love my team members to provide feedback, but I get really defensive." We have fabulous courses on both giving and receiving feedback
Mhm.
available.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. We've been working on that, and that's something that definitely you can have a look at if you're interested. I'm very excited. I think it is courses that are much needed in the workplace. And as a leader, it's always good to be able to have those sorts of resources to go back on because, yeah, I think especially if you're a new leader, haven't done this ever, haven't had proper training on it, can be super difficult to do. So, yeah. And obviously, when we talk about transparency, make both successes and setbacks visible, right? Don't just, say everything's perfect, everything is good. I've had that in organizations where they've been mass firing, And then the next big meeting we have, it's not even addressed. It's not even spoken about. It's not even mentioned. It's just like, oh, it never happened. And meanwhile, you've had your your colleagues that have been fired a week ago or month ago out of nowhere. And then nothing said, everything's fine. Or it's just mentioned in passing, oh, yeah, we've had to do some layoffs. And that's it. Like, no, explain why that happened. What was the reason behind it? That it was, a very terrible situation. No one wants to fire people. That's understandable,
Mm-mm.
but sometimes it's part of business, and I understand that. But you still need to acknowledge, and you still need to be transparent about it. Because for those that stay, they're like, "Am I going to be next?" Like we said, is this going to be, is this going to happen again in a week? Is it going to happen
Mhm.
in a month? Like
I
you don't.
agree, Tris. Yeah, there's nothing worse than being like, assuming George has just been on sick leave, but in reality, you're like, oh my gosh, George got
Yeah,
fired. Like, and you had
exactly.
no idea, right? You had no idea. So I feel that point. I really do.
Exactly. What's the other one we've spoken about? Recognition and autonomy. And again, I'm going to caveat this with the most important thing: build your culture first. Put the work in before you go on and do all those recognition programs and all of that. But it is still super important to take into account once you've built that culture around it. And some practical tips about that: provide regular, specific, and public praise. Obviously, doesn't have to be in front of the whole company. That might put some people not at ease, but at least just in team meetings or, even with another colleague, just being like, hey, you did really good on this work. And especially, I think the most important one is if your employees have been working on a project and you present it to upper leadership or you present it to that, make sure you acknowledge the work that has been done by the employees and don't just take all the credit for it. Not saying that you as a leader haven't done anything. You absolutely deserve to have some praise as well, but just make sure that there is really that recognition of the work that the employees have done, because that's super important.
Yeah, say it louder for the people in the back, Tris. There is nothing worse than being like, I put my blood, sweat, and tears into this. And then leadership gets up there and they're like, look at what we did. And you're like, yeah,
Yeah. Exactly. And it doesn't take anything, right? It just says, I think it shows even more that you're a good leader, acknowledging, the work that you present. I've always been told as a leader, you want to bring people up. You never want to bring them down. You need
yeah.
to put people up with you. And that's what makes a good leader. So I think that's super important. But yeah, ultimately as well, empower employees to make decisions and own their projects, right? Give them that power to do so, and no micromanagement, please. Like, if you've hired them or if they've been hired in the company, there's a reason for it. So
Hmm.
please just give them autonomy and let them do their job. So yeah, just give them a bit of that. Other things you can do: implement peer-to-peer recognition along with obviously manage acknowledgement. But yeah, peer-to-peer, I think acknowledgement can be good, can create some good strong bonds within the teams. Just ensuring that everyone works together well and acknowledges what everyone does well. Everyone has their strengths, so making sure that everyone kind of sees that and have them recognize it themselves, that's a good one as well. I think that can be done. Any thoughts on that quote so far on the
Yeah, like, as you're talking, I just have, like my brain goes a million miles an hour. It goes so many different places, and one of the things I immediately thought of, especially when you brought up the micromanagement, everything we've been talking about, these practical tips, it just circles me back around to, like, this idea that we are all our little selves in big people bodies. And at the end of the day, when you're like, well, don't micromanage, and it makes me think of like being like, now you're going to go put this away, but no, it has to go there. And even though you want it on that shelf, no, I want it on this shelf, even though it doesn't matter, right? It's like at the end of the day, we don't want to be controlled. We don't want to be micromanaged. We don't want to feel inferior. The only difference is if you do that to a toddler, they have no emotional regulation. They're going to flip out. We still hate it as adults. We just have the emotional regulation skills to not throw a temper tantrum. Like maybe we do. I don't know. I don't know you. But in theory, we're not throwing a temper
Mhm.
tantrum. And at the end of the day, one of the biggest things I've taken away from all of my growth professionally in the last couple of years is imagine the response this person would have If I wasn't talking to a 30, 40, 50-year old, what would the response be if I was talking to a 5, 6, 7-year old? And if the response wouldn't be great, I probably need to deliver it in a slightly different way because it's still going to piss the person off. They're just emotionally regulating to not come back at me.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
No, that's fair. That's a super good point. Yeah. And I think ultimately it comes down to as well as trust, right? And trust your employees, trust, like I said, they've been
Mhm.
hired for a reason. So, and I understand, right? Every leader, like you come in as a leader, you have a plan, you want to implement it. Not everyone's going to be happy with it. That you can't make everyone happy. That's not possible. But it doesn't mean you have to micromanage to make it. That's where the
Oh,
transparent communication comes into play. Why are you doing this plan? Why are you putting these goals in place? Why are you doing all of this? Why are you changing the way things have been done? You need to clearly communicate that to bring everyone on board.
ooh, I love the clearly communicate, Trist. Something I've been working on with W&O is having these difficult conversations or
Mm.
relaying some difficult conversations and the impact of changing our verbiage and how if we just change our verbiage we can get our point across but it's done in a more impactful and healthy way. So like you said, like with the micromanagement and like making those decisions and owning your own projects, when we go, I need you to have this done by this day, period. Well, that's probably not
Yeah,
going to
good.
be well received. And so we've actually been working on kind of like a mashup with this content of how can I just change my verbiage to make my team member feel seen, heard, and valued while I still have the outcome I would like.
That's super interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
It comes down to how you present it and how you communicate it, right? Not saying again that you need to come into a company and just be like, okay, well, no one wants to do this way, that's it. It's just okay, if you have a plan, cool, but clearly communicate it. Use that new verbiage, which I'm very excited to look at with what we're doing at WNO. But really, like focus on that, right? Focus on understanding. There's something I've read some negotiation books and things like that. You don't make people do something. You can do it two ways: by force, and that's never going to result well on the long term, or you actually make them want to do it. Right? And by
Hmm.
you make them want to do it is you make them feel part of it. You communicate it to them, you show them why it will benefit the company, why it will benefit them, why it will benefit everyone to do it this way. And that's how you do it. And you push,
Bingo.
you communicate it with them that way. Talking about that, a third big thing is aligning. We've spoken about communicating goals, aligning company goals with personal growth. Super important, right? You need to make sure that you set those company goals align with that person's career goals, trajectory, whatever it is. So collaboratively set personal development and business goal. Revisit, progress with regular one-on-ones. Keep track of that. Again, when we talk about feedback, make sure you provide that feedback as to where they're going, how well it's going. Are they hitting their goals? Or are they not hitting their goals? Why aren't they doing it if they're not doing it? If they are doing it, great. What are they doing so well? Again, going back to praise and appreciation. But all of those things are super important. Offer clear pathways for growth, provides resource for skills building, and just make sure every employee can see how their role impacts big picture outcomes. Because again, everyone wants to be part of it. Everyone wants to
Mhm.
feel included. Everyone wants to feel like they can be their true selves and their true selves is accepted and part of the company, right? And I think that's super important to align those goals with that and to make sure that yeah, everyone feels like they're a team and they're part of it, right? And wanting to
Honestly.
rest.
And it brings me back to the statement I've been saying this whole time. We're all our little selves in big people bodies and we all want to be included on the playground. Period. That's what we would like, right? It doesn't change. Just our emotional regulation changes and our reactions change, but at the end of the day we're human beings who just want to feel needed and loved, a sense of belongingness and like we're making a difference.
Exactly. So yeah, exactly. It's all about that, and it's making sure that yeah, as a leader, you create that safe place for your employees. be themselves and to know that the company ultimately cares about them. Because if you align the company goals with the personal goals and say, hey,
Mhm.
we want to increase revenue by this much, or we want to reach this new market, this is how you're helping us do this. And this is, how your career trajectory and progression could help us do this. And if you do this is how it's going to help. I mean, I'll be like, yeah, cool, like awesome. And then when we reach that goal, then I'll feel even more happy about it because I feel like I've actually taken part into it. So yeah, I think that's kind of really important, to be honest.
Absolutely. And like I feel up to this point, we've definitely been putting a lot of the loyalty emphasis on leaders.
Yes.
And we've been like, oh, like leaders have to do X, Y, Z. Absolutely. That's part of your role. But if there are employees out here listening and you're like, well, I'm not a leader. So, but how does this impact me? Employees also serve a huge role in the loyalty dynamic. So, for employees, building those healthy, mutual, loyalty driven work relationships are super important. But the key here is we don't want to overcommit in order to do so, right? If you're overcommitting, if you feel like you're having to fill your plate so full in order to feel valued, I would ask you to maybe take that step back and do a little self assessment and say,
Yeah.
"Ooh, is this healthy or not?" Some ways that employees can ensure that mutual loyalty without overcommitting themselves is through setting boundaries. We've talked in previous podcasts how setting boundaries so important. We've talked about how to do that, why we would do that. So some practical tips again for setting boundaries to encourage that loyalty piece is define and communicate your working hours. Turn off your notifications outside of work time, right? Like no one wants to be eating their chicken alfredo for supper and hear the ting 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 from your work email. Like shut it off. You're outside of the work hours, right? Say no. When workload limits are exceeded or you have too many requests coming in and you're like, I can't do it. It's okay to say I can't. No is a full sentence. No, no, I cannot. Right. And I think there's lots of reasons for that. First being respect your capabilities. Respect them. We're not superhuman. We can't work for all 24 hours of the day. Like, believe it or not, our bodies require sleep and eating and etc. Right. But also the reality that if you say yes to everything, the quality of your work's probably going to go down. Right. So your
So
employer is not going to be getting your best work. You want to also regularly assess your workload with your manager. So it's one thing to be like, there's too much on my plate. I've said yes to too many things, but we also can't put all the blame on our managers or our leaders. As much as we'd like them to probably be able to read our minds, they can't. So some of that is on us. If we are not communicating with our team leads or with our managers, they're not going to know. So we
really,
have to have those very forward conversations.
I think that's such an important point to make sure, our listeners really pay attention to is when we talk about those goals and company goals, how are we to set them, how are we to, attach them to career, to personal development goals, etc. If also that communication is on the other way around. As an employee, you should talk about, what you're experiencing, your workload, all of these things. You need to make sure that you actually, yeah,
Mhm.
communicate that so that your leadership can know, so that they can put the right steps into place and they can do all of that to, one, help the organization, but two, also help you as an employee. So I think that's really important. I think that's such a valuable point that you raised there. It goes
Yes.
both ways, right? And yeah, you need to respect yourself and respect your organization and your
Mhm.
manager as well by telling them what's going on your side so that they can make the informed decisions.
Like, literally, as I sit here and listen to us go back and forth and all the things that we're talking about, I'm like, this does not just all come down to like the golden rule, like do unto others as you'd want done unto yourself. I'm like, at the end of the day, I think it's actually that simple, but it's not, but I feel like it could be. Another thing that employees can do is just making sure that you're actually working in value aligned workplaces. So
Mm,
when we heard about Patagonia, if you care 0% about the environment, you probably don't want to work there.
no.
You probably don't because you are not aligned with their values. Or if you're someone who's like, I don't care about surf breaks, probably not aligned for you. And it's okay to say, thanks for the opportunity, but I just don't think that we're going to mesh or that our values align. Like that's an okay statement.
Yeah.
That's an okay statement. So some practical tips for this as an employee is research your company values first. Don't just I know it's easy to just like fire off our resumes and like bang bang bang, you get all these calls and then you're like, "Yes, someone gave me an interview." And you're so excited and you go in and there's nothing worse than going in blind and knowing absolutely nothing about the company that you're interviewing with. Like that'd be like me having applied to Patagonia. I wouldn't have known. It wouldn't have been good for me, right? I don't surf. Like I heard like boogie board. Like that's crazy. So you want to make sure that you have some insight into what the company you're applying to, what their values are. You also want to consider your own non negotiables. So, this could be like we said, maybe you're on the other end and you're like, I don't want to work for a company that doesn't care about the environment. Maybe that's your non negotiable. You're like, I have to work for a company like Patagonia who does care and does commit some resources and some financial aid to things like that. You also want to speak up or seek change if workplace practices fall short of their stated values. So I fear that this might happen more often than we believe, but a lot of people can talk a really big game and be like, we do this and we do this and we donate to this and we do this. And then you get there and you're like, yeah, this company's going to be great. And then they do none of those. And you kind of got bamboozled and you're like, what the heck? So it's also okay to say, hey, what about this? Or I thought that our company stood for that. And if they're like, yeah, well, we kind of like elaborated a bit, or just kind of made up a little white lie because we really wanted to get you in the door. Um, it's okay to walk away.
Yeah.
It's okay to walk away. That's okay.
No, 100%.
Um,
I think
sorry.
it's important to say because we've spoken about Patagonia. It's an awesome, absolutely awesome company. But like we said, it doesn't. If your values aren't aligned with that, that's fine. Doesn't mean that it's bad in any way. Whatever your values may be, then go for a company that values that and that rewards you for that. Right? Like whatever it is, just focus on.
100%. And like it's really true. Like it's a very true statement where they say it takes all types of people to make the world go round. It
Yeah.
does. And there's this like old commercial from the 90s here in Canada, Tris. I'm not sure if it like aired where you grew up, but it was like no one's good at everything, but everybody's good at something, right? And it's like so find your place, find your fit, and it's okay to walk if the company you're working for currently or the company that you're interviewing with right now just isn't going to be the fit for you because it's like trying to put a square peg into a round hole. Like it's never going to work. It's
No,
never going to work, right? It's going to be horrible.
like you said, loyalty is all about feeling like a sense of belonging, right? And if you don't feel like you belong into the organization because the values don't match, then it's never going to work. And that's fine.
Okay. And then our third and final kind of tip for employees to gain that mutual loyalty is advocating for psychological safety or really advocating for that community that you want, advocating for that workplace that you deserve, right? So encourage open, respectful dialogue in your team. You also, as an employee, want to model vulnerability and ask for feedback, right? There's no good in if your team lead comes up to you and says, "Hey, are you struggling with this, Courtney?" And I go, "Oh, no, I'm good. I'm good." And then my team lead walks away and I go, "I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm panicking." Well, that doesn't help anybody, right? You want to be searching for that feedback. You want to be vulnerable. It's okay to say, I've tried my best and I'm still unsure and I'm needing a little bit of assistance here. Right? That's okay to say. Being vulnerable is okay. No one is superhuman.
No,
No one can do it all. We are called a team for a reason. Rely on our team for help. You also want to use any employee resource groups or safe channels that your company might offer. This might help raise issues without fear or retaliation, especially if you are maybe working with a company or leadership who hasn't culminated a really safe environment. Speaking up, we've talked about in the past, can be super spooky. And if you have those channels or those resources to do so in a way where there wouldn't be any fear or retaliation surrounding that, absolutely use it. And then lastly, you want to support colleagues when they raise concerns, support them. That colleague had enough courage to speak up and stand behind them, right? Stand behind them if you feel that way and you agree with it. Absolutely stand behind them. It's kind of like an application in the classroom where I always would tell kids, if you have a question and you're brave enough to ask it, please ask it because there's probably 5 other people sitting in here too nervous to ask and they have the exact same question. So, the same thing in the workplace, right? If you're brave enough to bring that forward, there's probably a whole boatload of people who also have the same concern or have the same issue. And now you have some strength in numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, to conclude on kind of everything on this now 2-part episode podcast, um, I think it's loyalty is still life, but it's just it looks really different, right?
Mhm.
And I think we've acknowledged. I think times are different. Different values were prioritized, which again is not criticizing in any way, whether it's new generation or older generations or any generation in between. It's just it's different times, different values, different things that people cared about, which is absolutely fair and understandable. And that's been history for you, right? Where things have just people valued things differently. Back in the Middle Ages, it was about purely surviving and food and putting food on the table. There's nothing wrong with that, right? It was just a different time for different things. So yeah, but when you look, it's really interesting in recent history. That's short evolution with loyalty, and we've looked at how that has changed over time. But with that, leadership needs to evolve with it, right? Because you need to keep your people. That's super important if you want to especially build a successful business, be part of successful businesses. Businesses are built on people. So I've always said business is a people business where it's all about how you treat your employees and making sure that ultimately that works on long term. So yeah, we need to look at more modern, mobile, value driven workforce and what they care about and make sure we're aligned on that. And ultimately, what you mentioned, Court, is invite some reflection as yourself as a leader or an employee. What kind of leader inspires your loyalty? Right? What kind of leaders do you want to be? Because that is going to lead you to what probably your employees want. And if not, then maybe you need to revisit your company values and change things, and so that you can attract also the right type of employees that have values that are aligned to what your values are as a business leader. So, yeah.
Absolutely. It's like if you're a leader listening today and you're going, man, like I do think I have a loyalty problem, or maybe my culture isn't the best. If you're not going to do that, that self-reflection or that self-assessment, it's like doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result,
Mhm.
which like spoiler, that's the definition of insanity.
Yeah.
So definitely reflect. Reflection is our biggest asset that we have that's no charge.
Yeah.
Doesn't cost a thing to take a step back and say, what am I doing that's really good? That part's usually easy. But then also taking the step back and say, what am I doing that's maybe not so great and there's room for improvement?
Absolutely. And yeah, for those leaders that want to check out our courses, we've got a few courses obviously on psychological safety, how to build that safe place for employees. That's obviously I'd say the number one. If you want to take a course, that's probably the best part to start. We've got some on resilience, and then like Courtney is saying, we're working right now on one dealing with difficult conversations, which I'm very excited about. And that one will be I think of great help for leaders. Understand how to communicate better with their employees. So yeah, if you want, tune in 2 weeks' time for our next episode.
We also want to encourage our listeners to subscribe, rate, and share our podcast because we love that you are all tuning in, hopefully, on a weekly basis. We also invite you to share your feedback or your stories about loyalty and leadership, boundaries, resilience. We'd love to hear some different perspectives and takes rather than just our own. I'm sure our stories will eventually get repetitive. But if you want to be the kind of leader people choose to stick with, it starts with the right tools. So, as we've said, we have so much good stuff popping up at WO. Difficult Conversations is definitely my like passion project right now that I am so stoked to have hit the market here soon. So, we encourage you to head to wnotraining.com and start leading with some impact and change today.
Absolutely. Okay, catch you in 2 weeks.
Bye.